The Lord is always wanting to give us more. He's always wanting to give us more. And I feel like He's given us so much already. I mean, think back since you got here on Friday, how much has happened just in a short 24-hour period. It's like there's been so much. And you guys have received so many gifts and so many great things. And it's hard to even conceive that God has even more in store. Like He wants to continue to give you more. And that's our God. Like He's like so immensely generous. He just continues to pour out His goodness on us constantly. And so tonight I want to talk about just a little bit about hopes and dreams. And you did a little activity before small group where you wrote down, when I grow up, I want to be this, right? And it's always cool, little kids, they have the world is their oyster, right? For a little kid, there's no limitations. Anything is possible. When you're 3 or 4, you want to be an astronaut, of course you want to be an astronaut. There's nothing's going to stop you from doing that. When you're a little kid and you want to be a TV star, there's nothing in the way. You don't see the limitations. You don't see the obstacles that stand in the way. It literally is complete and total belief that what you want to do is going to happen. There are nothing standing in your way when you're a little kid. And but as we get older, we lose a little bit of that sense of everything is possible, right? As we age, we begin to notice that there are limitations in life. And obstacles start to, creep up, and we begin to see how some of the hopes and dreams we had as little kids sometimes aren't as easily attainable as we thought they were when we were young. And so we begin to deal with a little bit of disappointment, right? Life becomes filled with pressures. We start to deal with pressures as we grow older. And you begin to realize that sometimes your plans do not pan out. The things that you hoped for and you longed for when you were young just don't always necessarily pan out according to your plan. So it leaves you with a question then. When you get to that point, when you realize that maybe your hopes and dreams aren't necessarily gonna work out, how do you handle that? How do you respond to that? And I would say that encountering disappointment and learning how to deal with disappointment in life is one of the most important skills that we can ever possess. How do we deal with disappointment? I look back on my own life. I struggled with a lot of disappointment sometimes, especially during my 20s. It was during my right post-college. My parents both were a bit older than most parents. My parents were in their 40s when I was born, and my siblings were much older than me. I'm the youngest of 7, but there was 22 years between my oldest brother and me. And it was almost like we were 2 families. There were 4 that were born really close together, and then 2 that were together, and then there was me. All right? I was the oops baby. Okay, all right? And so I grew up with my parents being much older than most of my peers. And there was a little bit growing up, I struggled with envy sometimes because many of my peers had parents that were, in their 40s and they were just energetic and they were, loving life and all this kind of stuff. And my parents were a bit older and it was, every time I can remember vividly, sometimes when people would meet us, they'd be like, "Oh, is this your grandson?" And my dad would be like, "No, this is my son," And it was always kind of an interesting dynamic. But one of the disappointments I dealt with in my 20s was my parents' health began to decline pretty rapidly. And so right as I graduated from college, my father became very ill. He had a couple of heart attacks, and then he had complete kidney failure, and he went on kidney dialysis. And my mother, her health wasn't in great shape, but she was healthier than my dad. But my mother also didn't drive. She never actually got her driver's license. So all my siblings had grown and had moved away, and I was the only child left at home. So at the age of 22, I was kind of the caretaker for my parents. So like when my dad had to go to dialysis, 3 or 4 times a week, I was the one that had to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and drive him there, and then arrange and make sure they had a ride to get home, because he couldn't drive himself oftentimes because he was too weak to do so. And so for several years, I really struggled with that, because when my friends were kind of out doing stuff that 20-somethings do, a lot of my time, energy, and focus was spent at home caring for my aging parents. And so that was a real struggle for me, and I experienced some disappointment in life. And at times I told God, Lord, why did you give me the raw end of the deal? Because my siblings who are grown and older, they're off living their lives and doing their own thing. And here I am young, where I should be at a place where I can really experience and live life and embrace life. And I'm dealing with a lot of adult responsibilities that I'm not necessarily ready to deal with. I also struggle with some disappointments with my career. I graduated when I was in college. I was kind of on the trajectory towards priesthood, and I really felt like that's where my life was headed. And then, towards the end of college, I began to realize, just through some prayer and discernment on my own, that wasn't necessarily where God was asking me to go. So I graduated from college, and the first job that I got out of college was teaching religion at a Catholic high school. And so I was 23. My first job was teaching at 150 sophomore students at a Catholic high school down in New Orleans. And I didn't know the least thing about teaching a classroom of kids. And literally, I looked at the class, and some of these kids were maybe 5 years younger than me, and I was their teacher, and it was just this odd dynamic. And for the first year of teaching I had, it just was such a burden. Like, I would leave every day and be like, man, I don't know how to control a classroom. You know how you guys are in classes, And like, I would be, at times, I would be like so overwhelmed by it, and I wouldn't know what to do. So after my first year of teaching, I quit my job. I told my principal I wasn't going to come back because I was just overwhelmed. I was just overwhelmed by life. And so, looking back on that, dealing with my aging parents and dealing with trying to figure out what my place was in the world and my career, I really expressed a lot of disappointment in God. I was just disappointed. Like, God, there's got to be something better. Why aren't things working out for me? So it took some time for me to kind of work through that. But it's kind of this odd dynamic, the life of faith. It's kind of a paradox. Because deep down in my heart, even though I was struggling with disappointment, I knew that God was there. I knew that He was present to me. And I knew that He was, in some mysterious way, giving me the strength that I needed to deal with this situation in life. So, on the one hand, I'm really like crying out to Him and saying, God, why? And on the other hand, there's this deep sense of peace, knowing that He's there. He's in the midst of what I'm going through, and in some way understands what I'm going through, and knows what I'm feeling, and understands it, and gets it. And I have to say that I have to give thanks to Him for that, because had I not had that relationship with Him, had I not had Christ as the center and the cornerstone of my life, I think the weight of the responsibilities of what I was going through in my 20s would have crushed me, to be honest. I probably would have gone off into a deep depression. Who knows what direction I could have turned in. I could have turned to drinking. I could have turned to other things that would have tried to fill that void, if you will, or try to take my mind and my heart off of my problems. But Christ, being at the center of my life, He upheld me. He supported me through a very, very rough time. So I share that story with you because I want to encourage each one of you. There are going to be moments in your life when you experience trial, and perhaps you're experiencing that right now. I don't know what each of you are going through. But I know in every life, a little rain must fall. And everyone experiences moments of where our faith is tested and where our belief in God's power at work in us is possibly waning. And I want to encourage you, keep Christ as the cornerstone of your life. Build your life on him. If you have him at the center, when those difficult times come, you will have the strength to endure. You will have the strength to get through it. And without him, who knows? Who knows how you would deal with those situations? I honestly can say I cannot imagine what my life would be like without Christ at the center. Christ as the foundation. This doesn't mean that there are moments when things creep into my life where I feel them kind of competing with the Lord. There are times, the world is filled with temptations and things that try to shake our trust in the rock of our salvation. But honestly, I can say, looking ahead, I'm halfway through my life. Looking ahead, I firmly believe that I could not do life without Christ. I could not live this life without him at the center of my existence, as the cornerstone of my life, the place where I can turn when troubles come and challenges arise. Lately I've been aware of people really struggling with some really difficult situations in life. Facebook is an interesting thing, right? And I know this is kind of out of left field, but Facebook, you kind of keep up with the day-to-day goings-on of people. And there was a day and time when you wouldn't know what a person was eating at lunch, right? And now you know what everyone's eating at lunch, right? One of the things I've noticed lately is there's a lot of suffering in people's lives. And I know, and I've known this through Facebook, because these are people that I've kind of fallen out of touch with, but you kind of keep up with what's going on in their life. There's a girl that was in my youth group in New Orleans before I moved here. She's 38, married, 5 kids, and she was just recently diagnosed with a very aggressive form of breast cancer. And this girl, if you guys knew her, her name's Elise. She is just the most vivacious, her and her husband, her and Jason, they go hiking in the mountains with the kids. They just live life to the fullest. And here she was facing a very aggressive form of breast cancer at 38 years old with 5 kids under the age of 8. And she immediately, the doctor said she had to go immediately into chemo. And it had to be in a very aggressive chemo and radiation, a very aggressive treatment of radiation. She went through this. She lost all of her hair. Gorgeous girl, lost her hair. Was just, when you look at it on the surface, it's one of those things that would just seemingly crush you. Life was going so awesome for them. And then this happens. Let me tell you, this girl has taught me so much about faith. Because through it all, her faith was not shaken. It just got stronger. And every day she would post on Facebook some insight that she got from the Lord, some encouragement that God was giving her, and in some way that the Lord was just kind of lifting her up in the midst of all this suffering. And I was like, what would she do without the Lord? What would she do? Because seemingly there's no hope in this. But with the Lord, she had complete hope and trust. Complete hope and trust. And it never shook her peace. Her foundation was solid. Christ is the cornerstone of Elisa's life. Breast cancer was not going to defeat her because her house was built on the Lord. So, and then recently, another young man, Paul, all right, mid-30s, graduate of Franciscan University. He and his wife, 3 kids and 1 on the way, was diagnosed with cancer. And I saw this on Facebook too. extremely aggressive. He received his diagnosis in November, I believe. We're at the end of January, and he just passed away 2 weeks ago, but didn't know he had cancer until November. It was a very aggressive cancer that just attacked his body. And here's his wife expecting their fourth child. Well, the last photo that they posted was he and his wife. He's laying in bed, he's on his deathbed, and they're holding hands, and they're looking at each other. And it was a scripture, about I've run the race. I have fought the good fight. I've won the prize. Man, it's that faith. It's that faith that got them through this. And even though seemingly he was defeated, that faith upheld him and comforted him and his wife and his kids to his dying breath. And in some mysterious way, he is now with the Lord, praying for his wife, praying for his kids. Just more powerful than he was before, because he's able to stand face to face before the Lord that he loved, and praying that their life would be filled with a foundation filled with hope. So I wanted to share those stories with you because they are stories of people that are real people, just like you and me, who have faced mountains in their life. But those mountains have not crushed them because they had Christ as their cornerstone. So guys, if I can leave you with one thing tonight, is I challenge you and I encourage you, if you haven't done it yet, make Jesus Christ the cornerstone, the foundation of your life. Now. Don't wait. Don't wait. Do it now. Choose him. Choose to make him the center. Everything else must be on the periphery. He must be at the center. If you do that, your life will be built on solid ground. And when the challenges of life come, and they will, you will stand firm. You will stand firm because you have a God who upholds you through it all. So I invite you, that's what this weekend is about. We have talked about rebuilding our lives, making Christ the cornerstone of the house of our life. Do it. Don't wait. He's inviting you. He's inviting all of us to make him the center. I wanted to invite Park to come up and share just his journey of faith and how he has learned about Christ being the hope of his life.